everyone. My name is Jessie Hamill Stewart, and I'll be talking to you today about space infrastructure, cybersecurity, and a little bit about AI as well. So just to provide you with an introduction first to who I am. As mentioned, I'm doing a PhD at University of Bath, University of Bristol, at one of their CDTs, which focuses on cybersecurity for critical infrastructure, trust, identity, privacy, and security issues. When I'm not doing my PhD, which focuses on kind of the cybersecurity of space in a kind of technical, strategic angle, I also take on the role of program lead at the Space Connected Capability Network, which essentially aims to bring together communities in both cybersecurity, like you guys, and also space domain awareness across the UK in order to boost the UK's space resilience. So it's really a delight to be here talking to you guys today about space, because it's a really important area of critical infrastructure which is often overlooked because it's seen as too special or too different or too weird. But actually, hopefully I'll convey to you that there are lots of similarities with the work that you do as well. So just very briefly, I'll just talk to you about the kind of what space is, why it matters, security of it, vulnerabilities, and a little bit about cooperation if we have time. So firstly, when I firstly think about space and space systems, I think about it in terms of the services that it provides. So you can see here on the far left, we've got imagery. So that's one of the areas in which we really rely on space infrastructure. So I'm talking about Earth observation, being able to truly depict, when there's a disaster like an earthquake or a flood, it helps us really understand the full extent of the impact on Earth. And it's quite a true depiction as well, because, it's quite hard to, well, in today's age, maybe not, but usually it's quite hard to manipulate images. And it also helps with weather forecasting, things like that. Then communications. This is another really important area of space. The military relies on space to communicate with each other, but also many people who live in rural areas and need satellite broadband. If you listened to the radio recently, you probably used a satellite indirectly somehow. And then there's also positioning, navigation, and timing on the far right there. This is probably the most important. They're all important. But this is all about guiding our aeroplanes so they can take off accurately. It's also about trains, sustaining the energy grid. So a lot of the other critical infrastructure on which we rely actually needs space services in some way. That timing is fundamental for financial transactions and things like that. So that's one of the ways in which you can think about space systems, but you can also think about the value of it. So I don't know if you can see that very well, but according to this World Economic Forum report, space has this potential to be a $1.8 trillion growth industry. And that's because, we're only seeing the very beginning of the expansion of space infrastructure right now. We've heard about data centers. People are putting data centers in space. Don't ask me how. It's the beginning of that process. But we're really seeing the expansion of space infrastructure, and what that means is potential vulnerabilities and the needs for people to think about those vulnerabilities and how to mitigate them. And also, that growth isn't just because of Earth observation, it's because of all of the different types of services that form part of space infrastructure. Okay, so now to go into the vulnerabilities a little bit more. When I think about the vulnerabilities of space systems, who, by the way, here, just out of interest, is familiar with this architecture that you can see on the screen? Not seeing many hands up. Oh, there is one though. Okay, cool. It's couple. Okay, so when I think about space in terms of its physical architecture, I'll think about the space segment, which is the one right at the top there, the satellites orbiting in space, everything that's up there in the sky. And then I also think about the user segment. This is all of our user devices, our phones. If you use Google Maps today to find the venue, you're in the user segment there. And then there's also the ground segment, which is the segment which controls and monitors satellite systems, and then also the link segment, which is all about the links in between all of those segments. And each of those segments has its own set of vulnerabilities, but it's really important to also recognize the fact that all of these segments are dependent on each other. So we need the ground segment to be working, we need there to not be disruption with the control of the satellites in order to ensure that the end users are receiving a good, consistent service. So just to draw a little bit upon some of the unique vulnerabilities that come with space systems, we haven't gotten to AI yet, we will. this may be obvious, it may not, but in terms of the space segment, we're definitely worried about the fact that there's no really easy physical access to satellites by the time they are in orbit. And you may or may not have heard of the Boeing Starliner mission, in which this particular space vehicle was stuck in space because the astronauts were supposed to be going up there for 8 days, but there was a problem with the vessel that they went up there in, and then they weren't able to fix it themselves, so they ended up staying up there in space for many, many months until another SpaceX one actually came and collected them. So it's a real issue, the lack of physical access. Then there's also the user segment and how that's impacted. So the signals that I was mentioning that go between space and down to the ground, they're quite weak and easy to intercept. Any one of us in this room could buy a piece of spoofing equipment or a jamming device and start to intercept those signals. And this has big impacts, for example, on the maritime sector, in which there's no way you can see that little red line. But that vessel was supposed to be going towards the open ocean. It was navigated by GPS, but instead its signals were spoofed. It thought it was going straight. It was actually turning back on itself towards Iranian territory where it could be seized. So these do, they have impacts. They disrupt airports as well. Now, when we look at the ground segment, this is the segment that has the most similarities with probably the work that a lot of you do in the room, because the ground segment consists of a lot of legacy systems. It's got a lot of similarities in terms of what you worry about and also the infrastructure and how it's operated. Lots of old systems that have been in place for a long time, so satellites actually. And so because of this, I had a look at some of the cyber attacks that have taken place against space ground infrastructure, and I mapped them to the MITRE attack framework, which I'm sure we're all familiar with here, and MITRE attack for ICS this was, just to look at how similar it was, and actually there were loads of similarities between space systems and other critical infrastructure in terms of the types of attacks that attackers could conduct, even things like initially accessing the system. So much of this terminology that comes from cyber can also apply to space as well. It just may not have occurred to you yet, but hopefully now after this talk. So there's also the fact that there's, the physical access. This is another one of the similarities of space ground infrastructure versus other kind of critical systems. Okay, Jessie, that's kind of interesting, but let's get on to the really interesting bit, which is AI. I have not watched all of the talks today, so I'm sure that some of these things have been mentioned and some of these things have already come up. But the way in which AI is transforming the space industry is in a few key ways. One of those is processing data. So I mentioned the Earth imagery earlier. A lot more imagery can be processed much faster than would be manually feasible as a result of AI. And this is quite transformative to industries like conservation, where people are really worried about, where is this near extinct herd going? Where are they going and why are they going there? That's something that AI is used a lot alongside other physical infrastructure like sensors to not just understand kind of what's this one group doing, but kind of to derive those bigger trends. So it's quite good for that. There's also the automation of some systems. So we've got things like predictive maintenance. And actually, we're probably going to be relying on this stuff even more, that which comes from AI, those automated processes, as we expand the infrastructure that's in space, because we don't have that ability to just, walk around our orbital data center necessarily, unless we're an astronaut and we manage to somehow align with it and get up close to it. So we're relying on that automation. And then, of course, the bottom one there is cybersecurity. So AI itself is transforming the ability to do good cybersecurity, to monitor threats, to recognize anomalies, and this applies to the space sector as well. Maybe more so, maybe just similarly to what you've heard elsewhere, but it's quite good at, again, bringing together that data, detecting when there is a problem, or generally the trends of that problem. But I would say that even though it is transformative and it is making a big difference and it is very good what it's doing, it's saving a lot of manual labor, it's making things more efficient, it also introduces vulnerabilities. I would say that, if you're thinking about space systems, any new technology that you bring into space or you bring into your infrastructure, along with it, other critical systems, I suppose, is going to bring its own, whole set of vulnerabilities. I'm sure today you've heard about things like data poisoning, which is then going to have an effect on the data set. So, of course, with AI, with machine learning algorithms, you're very reliant on your data set being accurate and up to date in order to provide accurate trends and to help you derive data correctly, but actually, there's always that risk of poisoning. And then what if that happens in space? What if that happens far away, where you do not have as much visibility as you'd like? And this has an impact to another key vulnerability, which is what happens when a sensor breaks or another kind of piece of physical infrastructure. I mentioned the conservation example earlier. What if one of those sensors that's being used to detect the movement of those special zebras breaks? Will AI detect that? Will they know? Will the algorithm pick up on the fact that infrastructure is no longer working? I'm not sure. But that brings me to my other concern, which is edge cases. So even though it's very efficient, it brings together a lot of data. It may be these algorithms aren't quite as good at recognizing specific weird cases, odd trends in which attackers are suddenly using a completely different method to conduct an attack. And then this is especially relevant to space infrastructure because of how the infrastructure is changing. And so keeping it up to date, keeping the data sets up to date, and ensuring that it's really reflecting the threats and the technology that we're using today is going to be a continuous task. So you can't, of course, just give it this one data set based on the threats that were around to space 10 years ago, because 10 years ago probably people thought that orbital data centers was just science fiction. So it's really keeping that data relevant and up to date is really going to be quite important, and also just keeping humans in the loop, because at the end of the day, a human is conducting an attack most of the time. And so you need to sort of be a human to recognize some of those human features that come through in that attack, whether it's to, memory bits that we've just heard about or anything else. If humans are conducting the attack, you kind of need humans in the loop protecting it too. Okay, I will not draw your attention too much, but I have run out of time. I'm going to just breeze through the rest of the slides because I didn't have as long as I thought I would. Okay, what do you worry about with securing space assets? You think about a few things. Firstly, you think about the entire supply chain. Something I didn't mention there is that a satellite, it doesn't just go into orbit after being designed, a year prior. It can take 15 years, even more, to design and prepare a satellite before it can then be launched up into orbit. And it's very important throughout that process, from the design, manufacturing, through to the launch and then the application of it. It's very important that you're recognizing how vulnerabilities can come into this. And actually, if you look at AI, it can come into any of these places as well. It can be used in any of these ways, and therefore its vulnerabilities could apply. You also want to look at both physical and cyber threats. So the physical environment of space is quite dangerous. There's not just radiation, there's also debris and loads of other things that you want to worry about to protect your infrastructure. So it's important to consider that. And then finally, all of those segments that I showed you in the diagram at the start, you have to think about all of the segments when you're protecting your space infrastructure, because there's no good just securing your user segment or just securing the links. I've got encryption and then therefore I have all the security I need. It's not true, because an attacker will find another way in, of course. And when it comes to space, there are many ways in, many potential access points. And this is a report which I should have included a QR code to, but I did not. If you want to learn more about it, my email address will be on the slide at the end. So this just expands on, if you want to secure orbiting infrastructure, you want to be thinking about it from the point of design, not just by the time it's already up there in space, which is why they like secure by design, but actually secure by design is good so long as it's also then maintained. And people who are securing satellites, specifically infrastructure that's going to be inaccessible at some point, they really have to be very forward thinking in terms of potential future threats, thinking about post-quantum cryptography and things like that. In terms of the ground, you're thinking about the physical access, but actually if you want to secure it, then you can just use a lot of the existing frameworks that we already have. There's MITRE, this is the ICS matrix, but there's also MITRE Atlas. If you want to look at the AI bits, that will apply to space, ground infrastructure as well, you know. And there's also Sparta if you want to look at an attack framework that's more specific to space. Okay, in terms of the links, you're worrying about data security, the integrity of services, and actually, when it comes to space, when it comes to encryption, it's not as there's not as wide a coverage of encryption as you would think, and actually there's a lot of data being insecurely transmitted in space. Honestly, if you started to look into the security of these space systems, you'd be probably shocked, which is why I'm here talking to you today, to really encourage you to apply your skills to the space sector. Hence, here are some opportunities just to briefly show you towards the end. So if you are in academia or want to create an academic paper, feel free to submit it to SpaceSec, which is on the far left there, which is a workshop based on the security and of space and satellite systems, and that's in San Diego. So take a trip to sunny San Diego, but the submission is the 9th of November, so hopefully you have a space paper in mind already, or just attend it and learn. Which is what I would really encourage to do if you want to learn more about the space sector. Then next week, if you want to go to the Netherlands, at ESA, they have a 3S conference, which is all about security of space systems, and that's one that has also just started to run. There's also some kind of international initiatives like the Space Eyesight, which shares physical and cyber threat data internationally relating to cyber and space. And just, you know, that one at the bottom there, the Sci Space Network, which is a CCN funded by Catapult, join us, you know, register. I realize I haven't really provided anything there. I'll provide you an email address in a second. But show your interest, join our mailing list, and then you'll learn about opportunities relating to space and cybersecurity in the UK. And that brings me to the future, which I like to leave things on a positive note. There is a lot of expertise in cybersecurity, and I don't think enough of it right now is being applied to the space sector. There's also expertise in AI. It's a new emerging area where it's new to everyone, I think, this particular version of it. We've seen automation for a long time, of course. And it's just really important that we keep on working on the problems and keep on kind of trying to recognize what the vulnerabilities are and therefore how we might begin to mitigate them. And that takes me to my final slide. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found it interesting. I'll welcome any questions if we have the time. My email address is there also, so please do reach out. Even if you just reach out and say, I'd like to join the SciSpace network, I can put you on the mailing list. Thank you very much.